Lives of Poor Boys Who Became Famous by Sarah Knowles Bolton. Chapter 21. Ezra Cornell in the winter of 1819 might have been seen traveling from New Jersey to DeRuyter in New York, a distance of 250 miles. Some covered emigrant wagons containing a wife and 6 children in the first, and household goods and farming utensils in the others. Sometimes the occupants slept in a farmhouse, but usually in their vehicles by a campfire in the woods. For 2 weeks they journeyed, sometimes through an almost uninhabited wilderness and over well-nigh impassable roads. The mother, with a baby in her arms, her oldest child Ezra, a boy of 12, must have been worn with his toilsome journey, but patient and cheerful, no word of repining escaped her lips. Elijah Cornell, a frank, noble-hearted Quaker, was going west to make his living as a potter and farmer combined. Like other pioneers, they made ready their little home among the sterile hills, and there, for 20 years, they struggled to rear a family that grew to 11 children instead of 6. The boys of the family were taught the simple mysteries of pottery making early in life, and thus formed habits of industry, while their limited income necessarily made them economical. The eldest boy, Ezra, now 16, was growing anxious to be something more than a potter. He was nearly 6 feet tall, thin, muscular, and full of energy. He was studious, reading every book within his reach, and desirous of an education which there was no money to procure. Determined, if possible, to go to the common school one more winter, he and his brother, 15 years of age, chopped and cleared 4 acres of heavy beech and maple woodland, plowed and planted it to corn, and thus made themselves able to finish their education. Soon after, the father engaged a carpenter to build a large pottery. Ezra assisted and began to think he should like the trade of a carpenter. When the structure was completed, taking his younger brother to the forest, they cut timber and erected for their father's family a 2-story dwelling, the best in the town, without any supervision. Ezra had made the frame so that every part fitted in its exact place. This, for a boy of 17, became the wonder of the neighborhood. Master builders prophesied a rare carpenter for posterity. It was evident that the quiet town of DeRuyter could not satisfy such a lad, and at 18 he started away from his affectionate mother to try the world. She could trust him because he used neither liquor nor tobacco, was truthful, honest, and willing to work hard. If a young man desires to get his living easily, or is very particular as to the kind of work he undertakes, his future may well be doubted. Ezra found no carpentering, as he had hoped, but in the vicinity of Syracuse, then a small village, he engaged himself for 2 years to get out timber for shipment to New York by canal. The following year, he worked in a shop making wool carding machinery, and being now only 20 miles from DeRuyter, he walked home every Saturday evening and back Monday morning. 20 miles before a day's work would have been too long for most boys. There was no danger that Ezra would grow tender, either of foot or hand, through luxury. Hearing that there was a good outlook for business at Ithaca, he walked 40 miles thither with a spare suit of clothes and a few dollars in his pocket. Who would have said then that this unknown lad with no capital save courage and ambition would make the name of Ithaca joint with that of Cornell known round the world. He obtained work as a carpenter and was soon offered the position of keeping a cotton mill in repair. This he gladly accepted, using what knowledge he had gained in the machine shop. A year later, Colonel Beebe, proprietor of a flooring and plaster mill, asked young Cornell to repair his works, and so pleased was he with the mechanic that he kept him for 12 years, making him his confidential agent and general manager. When a tunnel was needed to bring water from Fall Creek, Cornell was made engineer-in-chief of the enterprise. When labor-saving machinery was required, the head of the enterprising young man invented it. Meantime, he had married, at the age of 24, an intelligent girl, Mary Ann Wood, 4 years his junior, the second in a family of 11 children. As the young lady was not a Quaker, Cornell was formally excommunicated from his church for taking a person outside the fold. He was offered forgiveness and reinstatement if he would apologize and show proper regret, which he refused to do, feeling that the church had no right to decide upon the religious convictions of the person he loved. He soon purchased a few acres of land near the mill and erected a simple home for his bride. Here they lived for 20 years, and here their 9 children were born, 4 of whom died early. It was happiness to go daily to his work, receive his comfortable salary, and see his children grow up around him with their needed wants supplied. But the comfortable salary came to an end. Colonel Beebe withdrew from active business. The mill was turned into a woolen factory, and Cornell was thrown out of work. Business depression was great all over the country. In vain for months he sought for employment. The helpless family must be supported. At the age of 36, matters began to look serious. Finally, he went to Maine in the endeavor to sell the patent right of a new plow recently invented. He visited the Maine farmer and met the editor, Honorary F.O.J. Smith, a member of Congress, who became much interested. He tried also to sell the patent in the state of Georgia, walking usually 40 miles a day, but with little success. Again, he started for Maine, walking from Ithaca to Albany, 160 miles in 4 days. Then, going by rail to Boston, and once more on foot to Portland. He was fond of walking and used to say, "Nature can in no way be so richly enjoyed as through the opportunities afforded the pedestrian." Entering the office of the Maine farmer again, he found Mr. Smith on his knees in the middle of his office floor, with a piece of chalk in his hand, the mud board of a plough lying by his side, and with various chalk marks on the floor before him. Mr. Smith arose and grasped him cordially by hand, saying, "Cornell, you are the very man I want to see. I have been trying to explain to neighbor Robertson a machine that I want made, but I cannot make him understand it. I want a kind of scraper or machine for digging a ditch, for laying out our telegraph pipe underground. Congress has appropriated $30,000 to enable Professor Morse to test the practicability of his telegraph on a line between Washington and Baltimore. I have taken the contract to lay the pipe at $100 a mile." Mr. Cornell's ready brain soon saw what kind of a machine was needed, and he sketched a rough diagram of it. Without much hope of success, Smith said, "You make a machine, and I will pay the expense, whether successful or not. If successful, I will pay you $50 or $100 or any price you may name." Mr. Cornell at once went to a machine shop, made the patterns for the necessary castings, and then the woodwork for the frame. The trial of the new machine was made at Mr. Smith's homestead, 4 yoke of oxen being attached to the strange-looking plough, which cut a furrow 2½ feet deep and 1¼ inches wide, and laid the pipe in the bottom at the same time. It worked successfully, and Mr. Cornell was asked to take charge of the laying of the pipe between Baltimore and Washington. He accepted, for he believed the telegraph would become a vast instrument in civilization. The loss of a position at the Beebe mill proved the opening to a broader world. His energy had found a field as wide as the universe. It was decided to put the first pipe between the double tracks of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, with an 8-mule team, horses being afraid of the engines. Nearly a mile of pipe was laid each day. Soon Professor Morse came hurriedly and, calling Mr. Cornell aside, said, "Can you not contrive to stop this work for a few days in some manner, so the papers will not know that it has been purposely interrupted? I want to make some experiments before any more pipe is laid." Cornell had been expecting this, for he knew that the pipes were defective. Though other officials would not permit Morse to be told of it, replying that he would do so as requested, he stepped back to his plough and said, "Hooray, boys! Whip your mules! We must lay another length of pipe before we quit tonight." Then he purposely let the machine catch against a point of rock, making it a perfect wreck. Mr. Cornell began now, at Professor Moore's request, to experiment in the basement of the patent office at Washington, studying what books he could obtain on electrical science. It was soon found to be wise to put the wires upon poles, as Cook and Wheatstone had done it in England. The line between Baltimore and Washington proved successful despite its crudities, but what should be done with it? Government did not wish to buy it, and private capital was afraid to touch it. How could the world be made interested? Mr. Cornell, who had now put his heart into the telegraph, built a line from Milk Street, Boston, to School Street, that the people might see for themselves this new agent which was to enable nations to talk with each other, but nobody cared to waste a moment in looking at it. They were more interested in selling a piece of cloth or discovering the merits of a dead philosopher. Not delighted with the indifference of Boston, he moved his apparatus to New York in 1844 and constructed a line from opposite Trinity Church on the Broadway to near the site of the present Metropolitan Hotel. But New York was even more indifferent than Boston. The Tribune, Express, and some of the newspapers gave cordial notices of the new enterprise, but the Herald said plainly that it was opposed to the telegraph, because now it could beat its rivals by special couriers. But if the telegraph came into use, then all would have an equal opportunity to obtain news. During the whole winter, Mr. Cornell labored, seemingly to no purpose, to introduce what Morse had so grandly discovered. A man of less will and less self-reliance would have become discouraged. He met the fate of all reformers or inventors. Nobody wants a thing till it is a great success, and then everybody wants it at the same moment. Finally, by the arduous struggle, the Magnetic Telegraph Company was formed for erecting a line between New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Washington, and Mr. Cornell, for superintending it, was to receive $1,000 per annum. So earnest he was for the matter that he subscribed $500 to the stock of the company, paying for it out of his meager salary. Such men, willing to live on the merest pittance, that a measure of great practical good may succeed, such men deserve to win. The next line was between New York and Albany, and Mr. Cornell, being the contractor, received his first return for these years of labor, $6,000 in profit. The tide had turned, and though afterward various obstacles had been met and overcome, the poor mechanic had started on the high road to fame and fortune. He next organized the Erie and Michigan Telegraph Company. Supposing that the western cities thus benefited would subscribe to the stock, but even in Chicago, which now pays $3,000 daily for telegraphic service, it was impossible to raise a dollar. A year later, the New York and Erie telegraph line was constructed through the southern part of New York State. Mr. Cornell, believing most heartily in the project, obligated himself heavily, and the result proved his far-sightedness. But now ruinous competition set in. Those who had been unwilling to help at first were anxious to share profits. To save all from bankruptcy, in the cutting of rates, Mr. Cornell and few others consolidated the various interests in the Western Union Telegraph Company, now grown so large that it has nearly 500,000 miles of wire, employs 20,000 persons, and sends over 41 million messages yearly, and makes over $7.5 million profits. For more than 15 years, he was the largest stockholder in the company. It was not strange, therefore, that middle life found Ezra Cornell a millionaire. This was better than making pottery in the little town of Tirata. It had taken work, however, to make this fortune. While others sauntered and enjoyed life at leisure, he was working early and late, away from his family most of the time for 12 years. In 1857, when 50 years of age, he purchased 300 acres near Ithaca, planted orchards, bought fine cattle and horses, and moved his family thither. He was made president of the County Agricultural Society, and in 1862 was chosen to represent the State Agricultural Society at the International Exposition in London. Taking his wife with him, they travelled in Great Britain and on the continent, enjoying a few months of recreation. For the first time since, when a youth, 30 years before, he had walked into Ithaca. During the war, he gave money and sympathy freely, being often at the front, in hospitals and on battlefields, caring for the wounded and their families, and aiding those whom the war had left maimed or impoverished. For 6 years, he served acceptably in the state legislature, self-reliant, calm, unselfish, simple in dress and manner. He was alike the companion of the distinguished scholars and the advocate of the people. The great question now before his mind was how to spend his fortune most wisely. He recalled the days when he cleared 4 acres of timberland that he might have 3 months of schooling. He had regretted all his life his lack of a college education. He determined therefore to build an institution where any person can find instruction in any study. Preparatory to this, he built Cornell Library, costing $61,000, a workman losing one of his horses by accident in the construction of the edifice, was called upon by the philanthropist, who, after inquiring the value of the animal, drew a check and handed it to the man, remarking with a kind smile, "I presume I can, better than you, afford to lose the horse." A man with money enough to build libraries does not always remember a labourer. Mr. Cornell's first gift toward his university was 200 acres of his cherished farm and $500,000 in money. The institution was formally opened in 1868. Honorary Andrew T. White, a distinguished graduate of Yale and of the University of Berlin, being chosen president. Soon over 400 students gathered from over 27 states. Mr. Cornell's gift afterward, including his saving the land grant fund from depreciation, amounted to over $3 million, a wonderful present from a self-made mechanic. Other men have followed his illustrious example. Henry W. Sage has given $300,000 for the building of Sage College for Women and the extensive conservatories of the Botanical Department. Hiram Sibley of Rochester has given $50,000 for the College of Mechanic Arts, and John McGraw $100,000 for the library and museum. Cornell University is now one of the most liberally endowed institutions in the country and has already sent out over 1,000 graduates. Did Mr. Cornell did everything to enrich and develop his own town? He brought manufactories of glass and iron into her midst, held the presidency of the First National Bank for a dozen years, made her as far as possible a railroad center, and gave generously to her churches of whatever denomination. The first question asked in any project was, "Have you seen Ezra Cornell? He will take hold of the work, and if he is for you, no one will be against you, and success is assured. If success be possible." December 9th, 1874, at the age of 67, scarcely able to stand, he arose from his bed and was dressed that he might attend to some unfinished business. Shortly after noon, it was finished by an unseen hand. His body was carried to Library Hall, and there the Cornell cadets, standing as guard of honor, thousands looked upon the renewed giver. The day of the funeral, public and private buildings were draped, shops were closed, and the streets filled by a silent throng. The casket was borne into the cemetery between lines of students who owned to his generosity their royal opportunities for scholarship. Various societies in various cities passed resolutions of respect and honor for the dead. Froude, the English historian, well said of him, "There is something I admire even more than the university, and that is the quiet, unpretending man by whom the university was founded. We have had such men in old times, and there are men in England who make great fortunes and who make claim to great munificence, but who manifest their greatness in buying great estates and building castles for the funding of peerages to be handed down from father to son. Mr. Cornell has sought for immortality and the perpetuity of his name among the people of a free nation. There stands his great university, built upon a rock, built of stone, as solid as rock, to endure while the American nation endures. When the herald's parchment shall have crumbled into dust, and the antiquarians are searching among the tombstones for the records of these departed families, Mr. Cornell's name will be still fresh and green through generation after generation. Overlooking Ithaca and Cayuga Lake stands his home, a beautiful Gothic villa in stone, finished a year after his death. His motto, the motto of his life, is carved over the principal entrance, true and firm.
End of section 21.